summer league is over, and a big question us dynasty managers have is who from this rookie class is going to play right away. Hey guys, Andrew from Angle here. We are here today to discuss some rookies that we think are going to play right away when the NBA season starts. So this is important knowledge to know for dynasty managers out there who want immediate production. Maybe you're a winning team who either has a later draft pick or is just owning an earlier team's draft pick and wants a rookie that's going to contribute right away for you, then this is the video for you. So before we get started on the context to explain how we're going to rate these guys here, I want to introduce our co-host, Braxton. How are you today, buddy?
I'm doing really good. Really excited to be on this episode here with you, Andrew. Thank you.
Very good. It's good to be back. But we haven't done a podcast in a little bit, and I was out in Vegas. And next time I'm excited for you and Mitch to both accompany me to Vegas as well. We definitely need to get that going.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk about how we are going to break this down today. So we are going to talk about 6 rookies. None of the rookies that we are going to talk about were drafted in the top 5. So generally, you can assume, unless they're hurt, that whoever's drafted in the top 5 is going to play. Maybe not right away, but they are going to at least, put in a good amount of log a good amount of game time throughout their season. So what we're focusing on is outside of the top 5, but still in the top 20. And the reason why we want to do this is because oftentimes there are plenty of rookies who don't play right away. And that's okay. Maybe you're a tanking team. Maybe you're totally okay with your rookie not playing right away in year 1 and you're waiting for them to develop. So you get to start them and, just further nosedive into a tank to get your shot at Cooper Flag for next year. That's totally okay. But what we're looking at today is those who play a lot. And why that happens is because there are oftentimes, even in the top 20, is guys who don't play right away or even very much at all in their first NBA season. Some examples from last year: Kobe Buffkin, Jarris Walker, Jet Howard, all drafted within the top 20. All did not play very much for their respective NBA teams last season. They were mostly in the G League last season. Obviously, we are very excited for pretty much all 3 of those names this season. But what we're here for today is talking about who's going to play right away.
Yeah, and I think a good point too, Andrew, is you mentioned the dynasty leagues, but I think this is really something that could be useful for redraft leagues or deeper redraft leagues, or maybe even 12-teamers in some instances, right? Obviously, those high rookies probably going to get reached for in drafts, but maybe some of the lower end ones might fall all the way down when people are looking to round out their team. So it could be good to maybe take a flyer on 1 or 2 of these guys here we talk about today.
So there are 4 different grades. So we're doing a letter grade system for these 4 different categories that we are looking at. 3 of these categories you want to receive the best grade possible in, and 1 of these categories you want to receive the worst grade possible in. So a combination of those results in a rookie we think is going to play right away. So the first category that gets a grade is draft position. Obviously, those that are drafted, closer to number 1, there's more incentive to play that rookie as opposed to a second-round pick that's on a 2A or a second-round pick that's not making much money. There's obviously more incentive to play veterans and higher selected rookies over those types of people. So draft position is the first grade that we look at. You obviously want to receive the highest grade possible, an A+ being what would be the highest grade. The next category that we want to look at is the coach. And what we mean by coach is the coach's likelihood to play rookies throughout the season. So some coaches are fond of using rookies, some aren't. So for example, Doc Rivers would get an F- in this category. So you want to get a high grade in coach for this category because it represents a coach's likelihood to play a rookie. The next grade we will be looking at is NBA readiness. So this is something that's obviously discussed a lot in pre-draft analysis. Just somebody who looks like they're developed enough to contribute right away. There's going to be a couple of guys in here we're talking about today who are still a little raw, but for the most part, a vast majority of these guys are ready to go right away. Now, the last category we're looking at, and you want to see the worst grade possible for this, is team depth at position. So you want to see an F or a D or a C in regards to this category, because that means their respective team is thin at that position, which obviously increases the likelihood of this player being able to get minutes early on in their careers. So let's go ahead and get started. We got 6 rookies to talk about today. We are going to talk about them in order of highest drafted to lowest drafted at the end. So that brings us to our first player. That's going to be Zach Edey. Braxton, tell us about what you think is going to happen in Zach Edey's rookie year.
Yeah, so for the draft position, I gave it an A. He was drafted ninth overall. There were some people that thought maybe he might fall out of the lottery, and I know, before this past season, some people thought he was going to be outside of the first round altogether. Investing this draft capital in Edey is so huge for his value, in my opinion. It really solidifies him as a solid contributor for the Grizzlies right away. For the team depth position, I went C minus. So they've got Jaren Jackson, obviously. Brandon Clark, I think, is somebody that a lot of people are forgetting about. He's obviously not going to be able to play play next to Edey. So in smaller lineups, we'll likely see them shift Jaren Jackson up to the 5 and have Clark come in at the 4. But when Edey shares the floor with Jaren Jackson, they're going to go for kind of a twin tower situation. I don't think Edey is going to play much more than 24 minutes regardless. So I'm not too concerned about Brandon Clark there. For the coach, I went with a B. It's really tough to make a decision here. Taylor Jenkins has shown he's been willing to play young guys in the past. Obviously with last year as an obvious outlier. Edey, to me, seems primed to start right away. It does seem like they want to kind of shift away from Jaren Jackson at the 5 and have him play at the 4. That's the whole reason they made this pick, it seems like. He's going to play a massive role very very early on. Regardless of him still being a little bit younger. And then NBA readiness, I went B plus. The lateral quickness is a main concern here, obviously. All the other skills seem to be playable now, but it will be interesting to see if he gets played off the floor some nights. We even see, defensive player of the year guys like Gobert get played off the floor some nights, depending on how often they're switching to him. There's probably not a 30-plus minute role for him, maybe ever, because of this. And then for the his predicted stat line, I went 12 points, 7 boards with 1.6 blocks per game on 60% field goal, 70% free throw, and 23 minutes per game. So slightly under an even split for him, I think, at center. And those numbers, I think, are very similar to Ivica Zubac's and should be good for at least top 100 value in his rookie year. I think he's going to be the most impactful rookie out of the entire class this year for fantasy.
I definitely think that's a pretty good call with that last statement there. One thing that you like to see is the ideal partnership with one of the star players on the team. So we saw things work out very well for Derek Lively being with Luka Doncic, as well as Kyrie Irving too. And I think Zach Edey playing alongside John Morant, as well as names like Desmond Bane, as well as a rim protector and someone who can really bail him out on defense in regards to Jaren Jackson Jr. I think this is an excellent fit for him and is a big reason why he's likely going to play a lot right away. I think the Grizzlies plan to use him because he gives them an entirely different look when he's on the floor. It's an entirely different shift to their offensive scheme that they can do to try to change things up, add some size, some bruising physicality to the team in order to change momentum in a game. And he's someone who I think is going to be a great energy, momentum type of player who's going to be able to make those swings for the team. Yes, he's probably going to still be exploited on defense, just like most bigs are in the NBA. But I think he's going to have an offensive impact just because this is just a giant, massive man. And he is definitely very well coordinated and has a good offensive touch. So I think that's all going to work in his favor. And I think also too, when you have the 1.6 blocks per game, I think that is realistic. Even though he wasn't an amazing shot blocker at Purdue, he was also the star player playing like close to almost 40 minutes a night. So when you are the huge star player on a team, they definitely want you to take a little bit less responsibility defensively in order for you to avoid being in foul trouble. So now Edey doesn't have to worry about something like that.
Yeah, and let me try. And just to your point about him playing next to Ja, the same way kind of Lively plays next to Luka. For those who maybe think the 12 points per game is a little bit high, I think it'll be interesting to see him turn into a little bit more of a role man when he's on offense, or playing with the first unit, as opposed to maybe when he's playing against bench units. Maybe they play through him and he just kind of feasts on bench units. I think the 12 points per game is easily attainable. I think maybe he can hop up to 14 depending on how many lobs and pick and rolls he catches from Ja. So I think there's tons of potential here for Edey.
Yeah, and we have to remember too that he was an upperclassman. So this is a finished product, somebody that should be ready to go. And I think the only reason why his NBA readiness is a little bit lower rated is just more so because of some of the weaknesses in his game, like you mentioned with the lateral quickness. But everything else is there, pretty polished and ready to go. So Zach Edey is definitely somebody that we're excited about. And for sure, once you're in your last pick or two, in a redraft league and he's still there, I definitely do not hate taking a flyer on him at all. And then if you're
He might go
picking,
pretty early.
right,
He might
yep,
go really early.
that's definitely possible. There might even be some people that reach on him too, which is also a big possibility. And then for dynasty drafts, if you're, let's say you're about to, you just finished your last year tanking and you're about to turn it around, or you're a winning roster that owned the pick of a team who didn't finish so well, and now you're picking, 8, 7, 6, something around there, and you want to try to find your guy in this range who's going to play right away, then Zach Edey is definitely your guy. All right, so this is going to take us to our next prospect, which is going to be Matas Buzelis. So Matas is absolutely the rawest prospect that we are talking about today. So I'll start us off with his NBA readiness, which I give to be a C+. And that is mainly because of his shooting percentages. This is something that he absolutely has to work on. Obviously people pointed towards the bad shooting for the G League Ignite. He still did not shoot very well for during summer league as well. The poor shooting splits, in addition to the stocks, rebounding, and scoring, was kind of reminiscent of like the early years of Darius Bazley when he was playing a lot on the Thunder. Obviously, he's going to be a lot better than that, but I'm just saying that's kind of what his stat set almost looks like at this moment in time. So that's why I want to talk about NBA readiness versus, because he's definitely the rawest guy that we were talking about here today. His draft position, I gave an A. He was drafted 11th overall, only a couple of back from where Zach Edey was drafted. Team depth at position, I'm going to give a C. Mainly all he's dealing with in regards to trying to get playing time is Torrey Craig, Patrick Williams, and occasionally Jalen Smith if they're trying to go jumbo with Smith and Vucevic on the floor at the same time. I'm gonna cut to the chase right here and tell everybody that Matas Buzelis is definitely better than Torrey Craig. Now, perhaps Pat Will is a better fit with the starting unit, and that's okay. I still think he hasn't really panned out into what the Bulls expected him to be. He was a top 5 pick, so in regards to that, and speaking to the grade we gave to him on draft position, I think the team should invest more in Matas at this point, because Pat Will hasn't necessarily panned out the way that they want him to. But like I mentioned, he will probably still start. Honestly, both he and Craig may still start in those 2 spots because they are a better fit alongside Kobe White, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic. But I think Matas is somebody who's going to probably play off the bench right away. It's mainly just him and Ayo Dosunmu coming off the bench as regards to like what type of depth the Bulls have. Javon Carter as well too. And one thing that I will point out with Matas Buzelis is he has impressed at every single type of level and showcase he has played at besides the G League Ignite. So in high school, this guy was hyped up to potentially be the number 1 pick of this draft class. This time last year, it was all about Matas Buzelis. Even in the Rising Stars Challenge during All-Star Week from this season, Matas Buzelis was very impressive, and he was extremely impressive in Summer League too. We love to see those stocks numbers. For coach, I gave him a B-, which is coach is Billy Donovan. So like Billy Donovan's never been a guy to focus 100% on rookie development, because obviously that's not what the Bulls front office wants. They always want to try to, at least skate into the playoffs and sell tickets, kind of just be mid as they always are. But Billy Donovan has been responsible for the development of a few good young guys. He's been largely responsible for what Kobe White has done with his career, and he was definitely responsible for the emergence of Ayo Dosunmu too. He played Ayo right away during his rookie season. So if you are good enough, Billy Donovan will play you. So I think Matas Buzelis is showing us that he is a good NBA player, and I really am starting to kind of turn a corner in regards to what I believe his ceiling might be. We recently moved him up in our dynasty rookie ranks up to number 3. So we are very high on Matas here. And I think there should be more credit given to the fact that he was potentially going to be the number 1 pick, around this time last year. Predicted stat line might be a little bit generous in the scoring. I gave him 9 points per game, probably at 1.2 3-pointers per game, 1.1 steals, and 1.6 blocks. Mainly what we're focusing on here is defense. Even if he's at like zero point 0.8 steals and 0.8 blocks per game, that's still something that you like to see. If it's an 80% chance he's going to get a block and a steal per game, then that's what we want. Field goal is probably going to be rough. I'll be honest with you. 41% or maybe even down to as low as like 36% is absolutely possible with Matas in year one. I think he can play around 25 minutes per night. Again, one, because the Bulls don't really have a ton of depth. It is, off the bench, we're talking about like Javon Carter, Ayo Dosunmu, Chris Duarte, and Matas Buzelis, and then Jalen Smith too. So I think there's definitely a good opportunity for Matas to get front court minutes because there's not a ton of depth there. Again, Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic, Jalen Smith, and maybe Torrey Craig factors into that too. Obviously, there's potential trades that can happen with Chicago. We're not going to sit here and assume that there is going to be a trade, but it's at least worth noting.
Yeah, and just to kind of bounce off what you said, I think that's a really hot take to say he's going to be better than Torrey Craig, man. I don't know. Torrey Craig is pretty good. And I like the I've never heard it framed that way where you said 0.8 blocks has an 80% chance of a block per game. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, so this is the first time I'm seeing your predicted stat line here. I think these stats are incredible. This is if he's able to average close to this defensively as well as a three, that's definitely something that's usable in redraft leagues.
Right. So like the triple
Especially,
one.
exactly. It's the triple one. It's what everybody wants. It's Jaden McDaniels. And obviously without the field goal percentage, but if he's able to get there, that's definitely usable. It could be elite in the right build. I think the Bulls are going to be really bad. They lost DeMar DeRozan, obviously, didn't really replace him with anyone. I know Zach LaVine is coming back, but we saw pretty much the same team with DeRozan and LaVine playing the year before, and they weren't very good then either. I don't think they're going to be able to trade LaVine, but I think that's besides the point. I think Buzelis is going to be able to play a lot down the stretch for this bad Bulls team, especially if they're able to dump Vucevic. And a lot of those big man stats kind of get vacated a little bit, obviously, depending on who they get in any kind of potential trade. But there's a lot of room for Buzelis to get touches and usage and defensive stats. And I think he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. More than worth a flyer for sure at the end of redrafts. Somebody with sky high upside like that, especially in year one.
Yeah, and one thing I'll have to point, I of course need to point out is you will notice that I did not list rebounds and assists, at least in this stat line here, because I don't think it's going to be great either of those categories in year one. Really, what you're hoping for with Matas is something close to the triple one, 1 3, 1 steal, 1 block per game, and a handful of points. That's primarily what you would call a successful first season for Matas Buzelis. Obviously, there's a really high ceiling with him in our opinion. So there's a potential for a lot more, but if we can at least squeeze that out of him year one, either he's at the end of your redraft roster or helping you out in a deep, 30 team dynasty league, then this is an extremely useful player in that type of context. All right, that takes us to our next player here. Braxton, tell us about Bub Carrington.
Yes, Bub Carrington. He's really seemed to be trending up after the strong summer league for the Wizards. For draft position, I've got him as looks like you listed it as an A. Originally, I had it as a B plus, but I did move it up to an A when you factor in that they traded Danny Avdia for him. Last pick of the lottery is not exactly a ringing endorsement for a core piece of a team, but there's a huge hole here at point guard with the departure of Tyus Jones. So it's kind of a unique situation where somebody this young and this raw can play that much that early. It's really just a prime situation for somebody like him to be able to go and contribute immediately. Team depth position, I put F. Yeah, I like I mentioned, Tyus Jones leaving is so huge. I know Malcolm Brogdon is there, but he's either going to get hurt or traded at some point. I guess if they can dump the contract, I don't know. I doubt he's going to play 82 games or even more than 70. But any kind of any night where Brogdon isn't playing, or in the event just of his absence in general, Bub is going to get all the point guard minutes he can handle. I think the only person under contract is Jared Butler. I'm not even sure if they brought him back officially, but I think that's accurate. Yeah, Bub is really primed for a big role here. Coach, I put A plus. As far as how good of a coach Brian Keefe actually is, I'm not sure, but I can speak to his willingness to play the young guys, and that's really all that you're looking for here in regards to fantasy value. The Wizards will be bad, and Bub will play a ton. NBA readiness, C. Andrew, I know you said Matas Buzelis was probably the most raw guy here. I think Bob is going to give him a good run for his money. I did mention it's a little bit of a unique situation. I don't think he's really NBA ready. If he was on like a somewhat competitive team, like I don't know, like somebody who's vying for at least like the 10 seed, I think he might be in the G League a little bit this year. The field goal percentage is going to be terrible, and it likely removes him from being helpful in most redraft leagues where players who aren't as harmful can be found on the wire. But in dynasty leagues, or I guess deeper redraft leagues, you may be able to get some actual utility out of him in terms of points with a splash of rebounds and assists. Don't expect any defensive stats, and the turnovers are also going to be really bad. So it's really build specific, guard heavy builds, punt field goal, punt turnovers, things like that. And then for his predicted stat line, I went 13 points per game, 3 assists per game, and 0.4 steals per game. I did have him as 3 rebounds as well. I think he's going to get a little bit of counting stats in that aspect. The steals, I don't think are going to be there. And he's not a super high volume 3-point shooter. I think 1.6 3-pointers per game is kind of generous for him. And the field goal, like I said, I think is going to be really bad, all the way down at 38%. Mixed in there is going to be some really bad nights. We saw what Scoot Henderson did last year on some nights. He did have some nights of being kind of useful with a lot of assists at some points, but the field goal was it really made him unrosterable. I think he finished outside the top 300 for the year. Bub is probably going to be somewhere around there. I know I say over and over, rank is not everything. I do think there will be some nights where he can be useful, and I do think he is useful on the right team. But don't expect him to be ranked very highly at 9-cat. And then for minutes per game, I put 26. I do think he's going to play a ton down the stretch at the very least. Maybe, in the first 10 games where the Wizards pretend like they actually want to win, Brogdon might see a ton of minutes, but as the season goes on, I think Bub is going to play more and more.
I mean, you can definitely consider Brogdon to be a pretty good shutdown candidate too. But, I love Bub Carrington. Bub Carrington is awesome. I got to see him in Vegas. He's a lot bigger in person than I thought he would be. Just the archetype of player that he is, I think he's going to be a very good player. He's going to be kind of like a D'Lo-esque type of player. So I think you're definitely going to see some nights out there where we're talking about streaming Bub Carrington today. Maybe it's, March, Malcolm Brogdon's fully shut down for the season. So it's just all Bub Carrington, full steam ahead. But I think we might see a little bit of him early on in the season too, especially before the G League season gets started. So like during the first, 2-3 weeks of the NBA season, we'll probably see a good amount of Bub as well. And then if adjustments need to be made, he'll probably be sent down to the G League for a little bit and then brought back up after that. So I think Bub Carrington is someone who you'll probably see appear in at least like 55 games next year, probably even a little bit more than that, just because the Wizards are so bad. And I honestly think, even though they made this trade and got rid of, in my opinion, their best asset, they might have fucked around and got their point guard of the future here, to be completely honest. I don't think they expected to do it, but I think that they pretty much did end up getting their point guard of the future here. I am very high on Bub Carrington. We recently moved him into our top 10 for our rookie dynasty ranks. So I'm very excited to see what he can do. He's obviously going to be more helpful to somebody in like a 30-team dynasty league or a very deep redraft league. But like I mentioned, there might be some random days of the week where the Wizards are playing, the Pistons or the Spurs or something like that. Malcolm Brogdon gets a mysterious injury, and then, it's 30 minutes worth of Bub Carrington that night. So I think we're going to see that happen plenty of times next season for Bub.
Yeah, definitely worth at the very least a flyer at the end of your draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see these guys every year. Jalen Green, super high owned percentage in redrafts and things like that. Bub to me is somebody, just to reiterate your point, somebody you grab at the end of the draft, see how he does the first couple games, and if he's bad, you just drop him. There's no harm there. But if he pops off, you keep him and you ride that wave till the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that takes us to our next player here, which is going to be Dalton Knecht. So this is coming from a person who is also a Lakers fan as well. So let me tell you what I think about what's going to be happening with Dalton Knecht here. So for draft position, we gave him a B. He was picked outside of the lottery. Even though I hoped for him to go to the lottery, I absolutely love that he did go to the Lakers. Dalton Knecht was somebody who I followed very closely during his final season in the NCAA. So it was just really cool to see that come full circle and have him end up on the Lakers. We actually did an NCAA fantasy league. It was spearheaded by Noah Rubin, had a bunch of us analysts in there just to kind of, it was a free league and it was kind of a way for us to keep tabs on some NCAA prospects that we like. But one of the guys that I drafted, who I just read a news report about, Tennessee's got this kid from Northern Colorado and he might end up being their best offensive player. That was Dalton Knecht. And I was able to ride that wave throughout the whole season. And he was a ton of fun to watch. So for him to land on my team, I was very happy about that, especially because we have a very big gaping hole in, number one, what he provides, which is 3-point shooting, and number two, just the position that he plays in general. So team depth at position, I'm giving a D. The Lakers basically replaced Taurean Prince and Spencer Dinwiddie with Dalton Knecht and Bronny James. So really all he has in front of him is Rui Hachimura and Cam Reddish. Obviously, I think that Dalton Knecht is better than Cam Reddish, not better at defense, but probably just somebody who I would rather have playing on the floor. And Rui Hachimura is somebody who also can move down to the power forward slot too. So Dalton Knecht is somebody who can play alongside Rui. And the Lakers really don't have a ton of other depth in the small forward position. It's pretty much just Rui and Cam Reddish. I think Max Christie is more of a two guard. And I'm not sure if JJ Redick has plans to play Jalen Hood-Schifino or Maxwell Lewis. I would also assume that Dalton Knecht is better than both of them too. Well, I know that he's better than both of them too. Maybe Maxwell Lewis is going to be pretty good this year, but we'll see whatever happens with Jalen Hood-Schifino. But Dalton Knecht, I think, is someone's going to play right away. And his NBA readiness is an indicative of that too. I gave him an A- for NBA readiness. This is a guy who is pretty much a very polished prospect, a very good 3-level scorer, a guy who can shoot 3-pointers at a pretty good clip, and a guy who is also a sneaky good vertical athlete. So he is, I think, going to do pretty well offensively. He's going to most definitely get exploited defensively a few times, but and there's going to be some growing pains there, probably having to sit him a few times because of that. And they would rather, they'll need to get Max Christie or Cam Reddish out there to help lock down defensively instead of Knecht. So that's going to happen a few times this season. But I think offensively, he will settle in nicely. Coach, JJ Redick, I gave a C. The only reason why I did that is because we have no type of history or anything to indicate if JJ Redick plays his rookies or not, because he himself is a rookie coach. We have no idea what he's going to do, but I will reiterate what Rob Pelinka has said a ton of times, that the priority for the Lakers right now is developing youth. Again and again, he mentioned Max Christie, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Maxwell Lewis, and now Dalton Knecht and Bronny James. So this is really a big focus of the Lakers front office. Number one, preparing for the post-LeBron era. And number two, obviously dealing with the whole second apron and taxes and everything too. Predicted stat line, I think he should be good for at least 10 points per game. I'm going to warn you now, the stat set is going to be pretty empty. But again, what we're talking about is somebody who we think is going to play minutes right away. Dalton Knecht should surely be playing over 20 minutes a night. So maybe close to 10 points per game. Due to his good vertical athleticism, I think he'll maybe get at least above 3 rebounds per game. Maybe even get 0.5 blocks per game. So like I said with the stat earlier, 0.8 blocks per game means an 80% chance of getting a block. Well, 0.5 is a 50% chance. So if he's getting a block every other game, then that's something you like to see out of a position you don't typically expect blocks from. I think the 3-point percentage will be at least better than 35%. Pretty close to 2 3-pointers per game, like around 1.7, 1.8, something in that range. So at least above 35% from 3 and at least above 1.5 3-pointers per game. Because I think that's going to be Knecht's role, is spacing the floor and providing, maybe like a tertiary option on offense, since there's always going to be guys like Reeves, D'Lo, LeBron, and Anthony Davis on the floor. So Knecht is just a we'll use the name again, connective piece for the rest of the Lakers roster, especially to space the floor.
Yeah, Andrew, I noticed you said JJ Redick is a rookie coach, but I'm realizing you omitted his previous experience as a volunteer 4th-grade assistant basketball coach. So I think we probably need to go watch the tape on that and see how his rotations look there. But in terms of Knecht this year, I do think maybe he can be what to expect from him fantasy-wise. Maybe a Sam Hauser with a little bit more counting stats in terms of the rebounds and just a little bit more physicality. Taurean Prince last year averaged 9 points per game, 3 boards, and 1.5 assists. I think that's well within the range of Dalton Knecht. And Taurean Prince was usable as a streamer on some nights in redrafts. So definitely not the most high upside guy here, but could be somebody that you'd want to stick on the end of your bench and kind of just let ride for a couple weeks if he's hot. And if he's not, obviously there's not a ton of stock invested in terms of, fantasy draft capital. So he probably tiptoes the line in that elite streamer category to me, even as early as his rookie year.
Yeah, and especially if you're somebody picking just outside the lottery in regards to like a dynasty rookie draft, then and you're looking to, get a little bit of extra push to try to, push up more into the playoffs, or maybe you're a playoff, we're a playoff team and you're ended up being like, finishing as, let's say, like in the top 13, top 12, something like that. So maybe you finish 12th and you're trying to push a little bit higher and you manage to get into the range of Dalton Knecht in your draft, then he's someone who's going to provide that little additional playing time and boost for you. Because when we're in really deep leagues, the main thing we want to look at is minutes before we start looking at other, 9 category statistical builds too. It's really minutes that matter when we're in the deepest of leagues at that point. But I think in regards to, let's say, 12-team redraft, on days where LeBron and or Anthony Davis aren't playing, then Dalton Knecht is certainly going to be worth a look, in addition to obviously like D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, but they're going to probably be rostered all year anyway. So in regards to a Lakers streaming option, when some of the big boys are sitting, it's going to most likely be Dalton Knecht. All right, that brings us over to the Orlando Magic. Tell us about Tristan Da Silva.
Yes, I love Tristan Da Silva. He seems to me somebody who likely fell strictly due to his age and perceived lack of upside. I love these guys, these types of guys in fantasy leagues, though. Kind of these switchy forwards who can do a little bit of everything. And Orlando seems to be willing to let him contribute right away. For draft position, I gave it a B, just because he was drafted at 18. Obviously, not a ton of draft capital here in him. But like I said, we see these guys fall every year towards outside of the lottery, maybe well into the 20s, and they're just able to contribute right away. I think Da Silva can be one of those guys. Team depth position, I put a B. I know they signed KCP for that huge contract, but Markelle Fultz, at time of recording this, is still unsigned. I don't think they're going to bring him back. I think they're going to leave that point guard situation a little bit more straight 1 and 2 with Suggs and Cole Anthony, as opposed to that three-headed monster they were kind of doing. They were having Cole Anthony play some minutes to 2, Suggs some minutes to 2. It seemed a little bit like just kind of a weird fit for them. So, with Fultz out of the picture, KCP obviously is going to soak up all of those minutes plus a little bit more. And remember, this is a Magic team, a good Magic team that had Joe Ingles playing minutes on most nights. I think Da Silva can easily take those minutes and have him, again, be relevant in the first year. So for coach, I did B minus, kind of the same points I just said. Jamal Mosley seems like somebody who doesn't really care if you're a rookie or not. I know Jet Howard got buried on the bench last year as a rookie. I think Jet Howard is terrible. I don't think he's going to play much this year. I think Da Silva is probably already ahead of him in the pecking order. Gary Harris is still ahead of Jet Howard. So I don't think that's more of an issue with rookies for Jamal Mosley. I think that's more of a Jet Howard issue. Da Silva seems to me like somebody, again, I know I keep saying it, will contribute right away. NBA readiness, A minus. Again, he's going to contribute right away. I promise you. I really view him as like a Royce O'Neal type contributor, maybe a little bit extra points instead of assists in his prime. Or maybe a Rui Hachimura who can pass a little bit more, get a little bit more additional counting stats. I think that's kind of hit the archetype here, and there's room for that on any fantasy team. Royce O'Neal is one of my favorite streamers in redraft leagues. He doesn't even have to be a streamer. He could be somebody that sits on the end of your bench. I'm not saying Da Silva, right? But Royce O'Neal. We saw how good he was on the Suns last year, especially in games he started. And Da Silva, I think, can get to that path eventually. Da Silva is probably going to be more in the streamer category to begin this year, though. And then for the stat line, I did 8 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists per game, 0.9 steals, 0.5 blocks, and 18 minutes per game. It's very low end. 48 field goal percentage. Nothing's really going to hurt you. I would imagine the turnovers are pretty low as well. Really low end stuff, just not going to hurt you anywhere. Might contribute a little bit anywhere on low volume nights. Definitely somebody you'd want to target, I think, and in really deep leagues, somebody you could stick on the end of your bench and not have to worry about.
Guys like this are somebody that I like to stream at the beginning of the week in redraft leagues where you don't know exactly which category you absolutely need to win your matchup. So you want somebody who's just going to provide a little bit of everything. So I think, when you're streaming Monday through Wednesday, Tristan Da Silva is going to often be a potential option for you to just do a little bit of everything in regards to 9 category leagues. But yeah, I like Da Silva a lot. Coming out of Colorado, I tend to gravitate a lot, and if we're talking NCAA, I tend to gravitate a lot to Pac-12 and SEC prospects. So Tristan Da Silva coming from Colorado, I do like that. And again, someone who's probably not going to really hurt you anywhere, and he is a pretty, polished prospect, being that he was an upperclassman. So you expect him to be a bit, ready to go right away. And he is playing for a playoff team. And that's something you have to take into consideration too. This is a playoff team who says, okay, we need to address another need that we have to strengthen our team for the playoffs. So you're thinking that's obviously the line of logic they used in taking Tristan Da Silva, whereas opposed to last year, they took two 19-year-olds who they spent a lot of time developing. Obviously, they used Anthony Black a lot throughout the season, but they left Jet Howard over in the G League throughout pretty much the entire year. So I think what they did with Da Silva was keeping in mind, or what they have in mind for Da Silva is to play him right away as basically a third pass, dribble, shoot, jumbo forward that they're going to be able to deploy out there. In whenever maybe like Franz or Paulo Banchero is off the floor. So Da Silva is definitely a very good bet to just have a diverse skill set and not really have a category of major weakness for you. All right, that's going to take us to our last prospect, which is Jaylon Tyson of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I love Jaylon Tyson. This is another Pac-12 prospect. All right, draft position. This is our highest or our lowest drafted guy, which was at number 20. So I gave him a B-. Team depth at position. We gave this a C. So pretty much all he's competing with in regards to the either shooting guard or small forward position. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell's in the shooting guard position, but at small forward, it's basically just Caris LeVert, Max Strus. And obviously, Caris LeVert kind of, plays basically 1 through 3 as another ball handler when either Garland or Mitchell are not on the floor. So you have Max Strus, and I think Jaylon Tyson is somebody else that's going to fit into this rotation. Our third angle colleague, Mitchell, gave what I think is my most favorite and accurate player comparison for Jaylon Tyson. He referred to him as Caris LeVert with a better looking jump shot. And I think that's the type of stat set that we can expect at during Jaylon Tyson's prime is something similar to Caris LeVert. But I think, during his early years, he still has some room to grow. He is not an older prospect like Da Silva or like Edey. He is, I believe, 21. So it's still, a little bit on the younger side. He's not, 22, 23 up there. So that's working in his favor. And for coach, I gave an A+. Kenny Atkinson historically plays his rookies. Also, again, bringing up the name Caris LeVert, the coach of Caris LeVert, his first 4 leagues was, you guessed it, Kenny Atkinson. So when we give this player comparison for Jaylon Tyson, I love that he has the exact same coach that developed the Caris LeVert that we see today. So I think I very much trust Kenny Atkinson with the career development career trajectory for Jaylon Tyson. Edey readiness, we gave a B+. He was the star of his team at Cal. He was also the definite star of his team in Summer League. He shot 50, 40, 90 in shooting splits in Summer League and showed he's very far ahead of what was initially anticipated with him. I think he is already better than Craig Porter and Sam Merrill. So I just think he's somebody who deserves the ball in his hands more than those 2 players. The only players that I know are better than him are Garland, Mitchell, LeVert, and Strus. Isaac Okoro is a restricted free agent, so we don't know for sure if he's going to be back to Cleveland or not. So this is somebody who's going to be very helpful to the Cleveland offense as another ball handler for them, especially if they end up making any kind of trade, like maybe involving Darius Garland, something like that. Predicted stat line, he is a good scorer, maybe around 10 points per game. He's a great rebounder for his position. I think he will give you some off-position rebounds at about 4 per game, 2.5 assists per game. He should be good for at least 1 steal per game, playing around 20 minutes per night. He is a good shooter. He'll shoot around 48% from the floor and probably around 35% from 3. Again, I mentioned he shot 50, 40, 90 in Summer League. So this is somebody who has very clean percentages, and I expect to see that carry through to his time on the Cavaliers. So Jaylon Tyson is someone we are very excited about. You can absolutely get him in the 20s of your rookie dynasty league, and this is definitely somebody who you can get, with your last pick in a redraft, fantasy league too. Especially if all of a sudden in a month or two we see Darius Garland gets traded, then guess whose stock is going way, way, way up? That's going to be Jaylon Tyson.
Yeah, completely agree with all your points there, Andrew. Just to touch on Isaac Okoro a little bit, I personally think he's probably the best option to start at the 3 for Cleveland. There is some speculation because he's taking so long to sign as a restricted free agent that maybe the Cavs have something lined up for a player who has one of those mandatory 30-day waiting periods after getting traded before they can be traded the second time. So there's just some speculation there for some people in the event that that does happen. Depending on who they do get back, I think that's going to open up a lot of minutes for Tyson. Okoro obviously is a very low usage player, but he does play a ton of minutes. And I think even if Okoro stays on the team, I think there's massive opportunity there for Tyson, especially with the health issues from Karis LeVert. I think Matt Strus got banged up a little bit last year. And the Cavs can use a nice scoring punch on the bench regardless, even if those guys are healthy. So.
Especially too, he's bigger than Craig Porter, does a lot more than what somebody like Sam Merrill can provide too. So he's going to be a very versatile player off the bench for Cleveland. I think, again, going back to what we were talking about with Da Silva, these last two players that we're talking about here are playoff teams in the East. So I think, as the Cavaliers went into this draft process, they decided, who's going to be the player that best helps us out in our push getting towards the playoffs. So they went with a guy who was a star player for his team at Cal. There's somebody who's like, all right, he's not going to obviously have the role that he has at Cal, but there's a lot of different things and diversity and what he's able to do, which is going to bring a lot to the floor for us. So we really much like Jaylon Tyson as a good bet to play a lot in his rookie season.
Yeah, can I just touch on one more thing with you mentioned Craig Porter and Sam Merrill. Those guys played out of necessity, I feel like. I don't know if that was necessarily who the Cavs wanted to play. So, not that those minutes are be vacated entirely, but Tyson has a massive opportunity to take those minutes that Craig Porter and Sam Merrill were playing on a nightly basis. Because again, I don't think the Cavs wanted to have those guys in as big a roles that they were actually in.
I agree with that. So that covers the 6 rookies that we wanted to talk about today. Here's some honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about. And Brax, I wanted to ask you about one of these guys. There's another guy that we're going to discuss after this too, who I told you about earlier today. But some honorable mentions: Yves Missi from New Orleans, Tyler Kolek in New York, I think should get some playing time this year. Dylan Jones in OKC should play this year. And Oso Ikudaro in Phoenix, I think is going to get some playing time this year. But Brax, I know you've gotten Yves Missi in at least one dynasty league, maybe a little bit more than that. So tell us at least a little bit about your expectations for him.
It's actually 2 now, and I'm pretty excited about him. He is very raw. I think he's only been playing basketball for a few years. He didn't blow me away in the summer league. And Carlo Matkovic, I think, was really impressive in the summer league. Obviously, they have Daniel Tice as well. It's kind of up in the air who's going to start at center or where the majority of those center minutes are going to go. I don't think they're going to give him a lot of them to Zion, contrary to what some people are thinking. I think Zion is too injury prone for that. I think it's going to get him too banged up early in the season. So I think Yves Missi, if he's able to beat out Matkovic, or pardon me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but if he's able to beat him out, then I think there's a massive opportunity there for Missi to play in a 16 to 18-minute role at minimum, and he can do those classic big man stats.
Mm-hmm. There's another big man I wanted to talk to you about too. So this is somebody who was drafted outside the top 5 that we did not talk about today, and that's going to be the giant of this draft, Donovan Clingan. So really what we want to talk about, which is a subject we've actually covered in a couple of other of our podcasts, is just this Portland center rotation. So I guess one question is it possible for Clingan to maybe play alongside either DeAndre Ayton or Duop Reith at the same time? And then the other question is Robert Williams, the odd man out here?
I don't think he's going to play next to that. I remember one of our last podcasts of the previous season, we talked about the Portland big man rotation, and I think Mitch was saying it was going to be strictly 2-man, Robert Williams and DeAndre Ayton, and now it's even muddier with the 4-man big man rotation. I do think they're going to find a way to get Duop Reith on the floor. I stand by that. He can shoot the three. I think maybe it's possible we see him some minutes at the four. I don't know. One of these guys has got to get traded. I really hate this spot for Klingon for redraft value. Dynasty, I'm not too worried. Obviously, Aiton's on that huge contract, but they love Klingon. You spent so much draft capital on him. I wouldn't be that worried. But for somebody looking for production this year, I really, really do not like Klingon unless they trade like two of those guys away. I don't think he's going to play enough. They're going to, they're going to focus on his development. They're not going to throw him to the Wolves right away. I don't think the Blazers are going to be very competitive, but I guess to answer your question, I think Robert Williams is also probably going to play. I mean, he's on that contract. I know they didn't sign him on that that deal, but I don't know. The Blazers, I really don't envy the Blazers for having to find minutes for these guys. I think Klingon might be the odd man out early on. I don't think he gets minutes early in the season. And maybe if Robert Williams gets hurt or looks bad or Duop Reef looks unplayable or something, then maybe Klingon steps in. But I just don't think there's room there for all four of them.
There's surely no way they're just going to, not use Ayton or somehow scale Ayton's minutes back. I think Ayton's minutes are always going to stay where they are. It's just really about what happens with Reef and Time Lord and how that all mixes in also with Klingon too. Because when Klingon plays, he does the things you want with the big man stats, rebounding, blocks, good field goal percentage. That's always going to be there when he does play. He should be somebody who's going to be producing those types of lines. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think it's going to be rough, especially early on and probably throughout the year too. But we'll see. We'll see if Portland's got any moves left in them as well, transaction wise. So that covers the rookies that we wanted to talk about today. Again, 6 main ones as well as some honorable mentions here. And just a reminder, if you wanted to see where all of our content is, you want to see what social media we're on and see what platforms we put out our content on, you can find all of that in one place, anglefantasybasketball.wordpress.com. Make sure to check that website out. Also, too, leave us a review on Spotify. If you're an audio platform listener, then let us know your thoughts and comments about the rookies we're talking about today and leave us a review on the podcast. Let us know how we're doing. Be sure to comment below for the video as well, too. Like this video if you haven't already and subscribe to the channel if you are new, and we'll catch you guys next time.